Good evening and welcome to Artists Talk on Art on Monday, March 6, 2023. I'm Jacqueline Rada, Secretary of the Board of Directors. Tonight, Doug Shear, President of ATOA, will explore the variety of abstraction seen in the 19 artist group show at the Lockwood Gallery, currently on view, located at 747 Route 28 in Kingston. Title of the exhibition is Driven to Abstraction. It opened this past Saturday. Doug, in addition to moderating the panel this evening, is also participating as one of the artists in the show. This copyrighted Zoom event is part of our Winter Spring series. In our 49th year, ATOA has presented over 8,500 artists and more than 1,000 recorded events. Please join us next Monday, March 13th, when we will delve into the business of art in a panel called Financial Advice for Artists. It's always a good thing to have. Tonight's event is going to run about 90 minutes, and we offer you a chance to direct questions to the panel in the last 10 or 15 minutes via the Zoom chat function. So you can be putting questions into the chat throughout the evening, and in the last 10 minutes, they will be addressed. Now let me introduce our moderator, Doug Shear. He was a pioneering video artist who ran the Egg Store video facility in Tribeca in the 1970s and served fellow video artists, including Nam June Paik, Charlotte Moorman, Twyla Thorpe, Bill Viola, Merce Cunningham, Carol Lee Schneeman, and Yoko Ono. In 1974, he was a co-founder of Artists Talk on Art, the art world's preeminent forum. The ATO archive resides at the Archives of American Art at the Smithsonian Institution, of which Doug Shear was an archivist. He has shown his abstract paintings widely and is one of the artists in the show, as I've already mentioned. Some of his recent paintings can be seen on his website, douglasishear.com. He has served as a board member of the Woodstock Birdcliff Guild and currently serves on its exhibition committee. He is also a member of the education committee of the Samuel Dorsky Museum of Art at SUNY New Paltz. He has created and ran the Birdcliff Forum during the pandemic period and was the producer of its Zoom programs, including its 10-part Woodstock Masters series events, which can be found on the Woodstock Birdcliff Guild channel on YouTube, and also curated an exhibition of those artists called Sense of Place in August and September of 2022. And now, here's Doug. Unmute, Doug.
How can I be a leader if I can't be heard? Yeah? So thank you. And if Maruna, if you could put up the first image. I'm going to show just a small handful of images. And this is a small image. This is a 3-inch by 12-inch painting on Yupo paper with acrylic pencils and graphite. Next one, please. This is a painting on canvas. This is 24 by 36. Again, it's acrylic, acrylic inks, graphite and pens, graphite, and also colored ink pens and colored pencils. Next piece, please. This is a painting on archival paper, measuring 14 by 17, and again with acrylic, graphite, and colored pencils. Next piece. This is a painting on canvas, 20 by 24, And this is mainly, looking at it right here, is mainly acrylic with some inks as well. There'd be also acrylic inks. Next, please. This is a piece that's in the show at Lockwood right now. So this is a 14 by 17 acrylic with graphite on acid-free paper. Next, please. Or is that, maybe that's the last one, or is there one more?
I think that's the last one. Dan.
Okay. Let's go to my beautiful face. Okay. Can I be full screen now? What has to happen to make that happen?
I see your full screen. So
Oh, you do?
Okay.
All right,
Yeah.
fine. So some opening thoughts on tonight's panel and on the exhibition. Abstract art has a long pedigree and dates at least back to the late 19th century, but in some ways reaches back farther with examples of highly abstract aspects seen in the work of J.M.W. Turner, in some Renaissance art, as well as ancient forms in China and other parts of Asia, and even in cave painting. Abstract art generally uses its own visual language of shapes, its iconography of forms, colors, and lines to create a composition which usually exists free of direct references to reality. Abstract art, non-figurative art, non-objective art, and non-representational art are all closely related. They have similar, but perhaps not perfectly identical meanings. Abstract expressionism, which influenced many of the artists in this exhibition, including myself, also has many varied permutations. Will Barnett, the centenarian artist who lived above the National Arts Club for decades, appearing in one of his several ATOA panels, said, and I'm freely extrapolating his comment, quote, "Before World War II, most art was outer directed. After the war, it became mostly inner directed." That really captures the essence of abstract art. The New York School, as it was named by my late colleague, the critic Irving Sandler, one of my fellow founding board members of Artist Talk on Art, was enigmatic in that it embraced many approaches, including action painting, gestural abstraction, geometric abstraction, landscape-oriented abstraction, semi-figuration, color field, hard edge abstract painting, optical formats, semi-surrealist, minimalist, and even conceptual. The artists in this exhibition at Lockwood represent many of those genres of abstraction. My three driven to abstraction exhibiting colleagues here, Kathy Goodell, Heidi Lanino, and David Anselm Turner, each utilizes a different approach, yet share some similar sensibilities, as I think you will see. Kathy Goodell uses a mysterious, at least mysterious to me, synthesis of biomorphic forms drawn from nature to abstractly depict landscapes and does so non-objectively. Heidi Lanino uses a wide range of materials in her work, but virtually all of them assist her in creating many works that abstractly incorporate references to the body. David Anselm Turner is also a filmmaker in addition to being a painter. His paintings are dynamic with a gestural application and correction of oil paint that is intuitive, sophisticated, and nuanced. My own paintings, which you've just seen, are predominantly gestural. And I draw most of my roots from exposure to the New York school and my childhood exposure to the teachings and persona of Hans Hofmann, of whom my parents were students. I will introduce and assist each of the three in alphabetical order, occasionally questioning each as they show their work. I request that you hold your questions until the end of their screenings, actually toward the end of the entire presentation. Please use the Zoom chat to register your questions. You'll find that at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Now for Kathy Goodell. Kathy Goodell was born in San Francisco and attended the San Francisco Art Institute, where she received both her BFA and MFA in sculpture. Her professors included Jay DeFeo and Jim Nutt. Goodell has been the recipient of grants and awards from the Foundation for Contemporary Art, a retrospective exhibition at the Samuel Dorsky Museum, which I saw, I can tell you was a wonderful show, the John Simon Guggenheim Foundation in 2013, the Bow Institute, the Camargo Foundation, the David and Julia White Artist Colony, that's in Central America, the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York Foundation for the Arts, and the Pollock Krasner Foundation, as well as receiving a Fulbright Fellowship in Romania. She has exhibited extensively both nationally and internationally, including solo exhibitions at the Dorsky Museum, the New York Public Library, the Queens Arts Center, the Berkeley Museum, the Paul Aglam Gallery, and has been included in major group exhibitions at the Los Angeles Institute of Contemporary Art, the Boise Art Museum, the Virginia Museum of Contemporary Art, the Mendel Art Museum and the Drawing Center in New York. She exhibited with the Willoughby Sharp Gallery, located at 8 Spring Street in on the Bowery, that ran from 1988 to 1991, and was part of a scene of artists that included Hannah Wilke, Judith Linares, Elizabeth King, and Robert Crumb. Goodell's work has been reviewed in the Huffington Post, Hyperallergic, White Hot Magazine, Juxtapose Magazine, the New York Times, Arts Magazine, Art Forum, Kathy Goodell, In for Loop, and Avalanche Magazine, a journal that was published from 1970 to 76, and included the work of Joseph Beuys, Vito Acconci, and many artists who are now considered to be historical figures. Her work is represented in several books, including International Glass Art, Art in the San Francisco Bay Area, and Bay Area Painting and Sculpture. She was also included in the award-winning documentary film, Crumb, in 1995. She is also an educator, having taught at the University of California, Davis, San Francisco State University, the San Francisco Art Institute, the Moore College of Art, and the School of Visual Arts. She's presently a professor at the State University of New York in New Paltz, where she lives and works. Now let's look at work by Kathy Goodell. And let's hope it'll be soon. Here we go.
Mhm.
Can we see the first art slide, please?
So I just want to thank Alan Goldman for including me in the show and for his vision and thinking of what a great title, wonderful show, and Doug for doing this for decades. So I'm going to begin with the series of paintings that I did that were included in my retrospective. And, and it's odd, a little story about how I arrived at these paintings, but I was struggling with working on a larger painting. It was kind of turning to mud and driving me crazy. And I looked down at my palette and really liked my palettes. So they seemed fresh, and it felt like my unconscious was somehow coming through in those paintings, and that they had in those palettes, and that it had more feeling in it than the painting I was struggling with. So I decided, okay, I'm just going to get a bunch of panels and work on them as if they're my palettes, and then see if I can turn them into painting. So it's sort of tricking myself to not be self-conscious about the process. Okay, the next one, please. Okay, close to the murmur. So I'm always sort of searching for something. I never have a plan in advance. So usually what happens is I'll make a random action, or sometimes it's deliberate, but one thing follows the next. So I guess I'm more like a drawer than I am like a painter, even though these seem very painterly and utilize a lot of color variations. The process to me seems more like drawing, because a lot of painters I know, they make preliminary sketches, they have an idea about the vision that they're trying to capture. I never have an idea until I begin, and one thing leads to the next. So next slide. Next one, please. Okay, pick me up on your way down. This one got, I think of myself as sort of a Baroque abstractionist. I definitely don't identify with strictly modernist kind of modes of abstraction. So, I think this one feels very kind of Rococo. And I remember when I was an art student and the art history teachers were really dogging Rococo art. They were like Watteau and Fragonard, didn't know what they were doing, and they were catering to the elite. And personally, I didn't see it that way. I really thought that they were making an excellent critique of society at the time. So I'm sort of playing on that in these works. Next one, please. Death of Machismo. It's just a wish. I don't know that it's going to happen. But so you can see the paint application in this one is very runny and drippy, and some is thicker. So each piece kind of dictates the attitude or the essence. It kind of defines itself as I'm working on it. Next one. I have quite a lot of images, so I'm just going to move kind of along. Not Rosie in La La Land. A lot of times, although I don't want to have any narrative in my work, I am really interested in language. And so I try to not name anything when I'm working on it, when I have a title. I'm just trying to bring up things that might elaborate or like send someone in a direction. And I don't want to ever dictate that, but I like to kind of send in a direction. And La La Land, I think the movie was out, La La Land, at the time that I was working on this painting. Okay, next one. Next, please. Okay. Therein lies the most evil poison of them all. It's oil and wood, and it has that little protuberance is a dried mushroom. And I don't know why, I just felt like it needed a three-dimensional element. And I guess I'm thinking sort of as the dried mushroom is sort of the belly button of the universe. Okay, go ahead. And human foibles meet the mad machine. I think this sort of self-portrait, I think I'm the mad machine, and human foibles I definitely have. And one thing, there's a little story about, I've watched a lot of film on artists, and I've never really identified with any of the movies that were on artists. And until I saw Close Encounters of the Third Kind with Richard Dreyfuss, where he's like making a mound of mashed potatoes, and it gets bigger and bigger, and then he starts throwing in all the objects in the room because he's trying to realize something. He doesn't know what it is, but he's trying to conjure this thing, which, you know, was, you probably all saw the movie, but was this place where the aliens landed. You know, I'm not trying to summon that, but I'm trying to summon something that I don't know what it is. So I really identified with that movie. Okay, next one. So even a skeleton can lose its key. So that's kind of a play on words, the skeleton key and skeleton, and I like fooling around like that. It was a lot of fun writing these titles because they're so not definitive. They're kind of leading the audience or whatever. But I had a good time doing it. Okay, next one. So the temptation of Mr. Magoo. So Mr. Magoo was a cartoon that I watched when I was a little kid, and you know, he couldn't see, and he was always bumping into everything. And you know, somehow he always ended up okay, but so I guess that's sort of like my process in painting. It's like I try to end up okay, you know, but it's a struggle, and I'm blind in a way in the process because, you know, I'm immersed in it to the degree that I'm not sure what I'm doing. Okay, next one. Okay, you can have your cake and eat it too, but not here. So what was going on at the time? Everyone knows there's the pandemic, and a lot of artists really enjoyed the pandemic in one way. They didn't enjoy, of course, the death and the horrendous world that was happening around them, but they didn't, you know, enjoy that. No social pressure. You could just paint. You could just stay in your studio. So on the one hand, I was trying to make joy and trying to reach the divine, but realizing that all this stuff that was going on in the world was, you know, violence and racism and misogyny and, you know, holy shit, it was bad. But, you know, I had to keep my sense of humor in some way, but also keep trying to find the joy. So there's an element, I guess, of politicalness in some of the titles. Okay, next one. Okay, this is some of these paintings were in my Dorsky retrospective. And so this is an installation shot of two medium-sized paintings and that group. And it's in the back room. Okay, next one. This is just a closer version of that painting. So you can see in this painting, it's really like a drawing. And, I start off and I move from one place to the next. It's almost like making a map that kind of doesn't lead to anywhere, and kind of more a map about kind of dislocating your psyche until you can kind of just be absorbed by the energy of it, but not have to name it. Okay, next. And this is the other one that's in the room. So you can see these are drawings, although they're done with paint, they really are drawings. And they really are kind of like the skeleton of what my paintings are, because I just add the flesh a little bit, but the process is the same. It's like one mark needs to the next until it just feels right. And in this one, I was like, really nothing touched anything else. Everything was held in this sort of static place. Not static, but what's the word? Static, vibration. Oh, it is called vibrations of this occupy. Okay, next one. And this one, I started off as a painting. It was a stretch painting. And then I just realized it really should be a drawing. And so I unstretched it, hence the border. And they were all, you'll see in the next slide, the installation, they're all under glass. And in this one, I really wanted to find something that you couldn't really focus on any one thing. You really had to just look at it for a long time, and it changes. It's actually behind my head in the room that I'm sitting in right now. But I was looking for that kind of flux and indeterminacy, and I guess it's related to some kind of map, unknown place, but a map. And in a land where we never grow old, music influences me a lot, and that's an old gospel song. It's really beautiful, and it just seemed applicable to this piece. Next one, please. And this is the three together in the same room as the last ones that you saw as an installation. So they're kind of sister pieces.
How many more do you have, Kathy?
I only have 3 of these. Oh, how many more slides am I running over? Not very many more.
Okay.
I'll speed it up. Sorry. Okay. I thought how many more of these did I do? I thought you were asking. Okay, next slide. So this was also in my show, and it's sort of like the only time I use the grid or that it's evident. And I think I wanted like a kind of map that unfolds and you have to figure it out over time. You can go to the next one. And we can go through the next 5 really quick because they're very new. I've done about 15 paintings in the last 6 months, and it takes me a while to be able to talk about them. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Next, we're going to go to Heidi Lanino. Heidi was born in New York City and raised on the South Shore of Long Island, and is one of 4 recipients of a full tuition merit scholarship. Lanino studied drawing and painting at Pratt Institute. For several years, she worked as an art director for L'Oreal, She is also a passionate educator of the arts who understands the importance of bringing art and creative process to young people and to the community at large. Lanino's work has been exhibited in numerous group and solo exhibitions, including Flatiron Prow Art Space, New York, AIR Gallery, Brooklyn, New York, Algira Center for Contemporary Art in New Jersey, Mindy Ross Gallery in Newburgh, New York, Storm King Tavern in Cornwall, Chris Davidson Gallery in Newburgh, Gibbs Museum in Charleston, South Carolina, and the Albert Wisner Library Sculpture Park in Warwick, New York. Her work is included in several public and private and corporate collections, including at the Carlisle Hotel, the ACLU, HBO in New York, Orange County Trust in White Plains, New York, Orange Regional Medical Center in Middletown, New York, Thang Long TLE Group, Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam, the Chevelle Hotel in London, Hotel Avalon in Beverly Hills, and the Hyatt Regency in Florida and in Kentucky. She is currently based in Tuxedo Park, New York. And now let's look at some work by Heidi Lanino. Okay.
Oh, finally, sorry, I wasn't able to unmute.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Heidi Lanino, and I just wanted to say thank you to Doug and Alan for having me part of your show on abstraction. I'm a figurative abstract artist, and I always approach most of my pieces by drawing. I say that I draw in most of the mediums that I work in. I'm a studio artist, and most of my work is figurative and figurative based. Charcoal is probably one of my favorite materials to use. And these pieces, and you can switch to the next slide, that's just me working, and then the next slide should be the two. I generally start these pieces with my eyes closed and working in two hands and trying to find the figure. And once I find the composition, then I'll start reworking. And if the piece starts to get a bit too realistic or showing the figure too realistically, I will always go back and erase and start taking pieces away and trying to find the abstraction again. I'm always trying to reveal, I call these drawings, drawing from the inside out, is drawing from the abstract space and trying to show an emotion and a gesture instead of what the female really looks like. So this is a series that I have about a bunch of these particular drawings that are the drawing from the inside out. You can switch to the next file. I tend to draw, I move around my studio a lot. My work is gestural, it's about movement, it's figuration. I work on the floor, I work on the wall, the canvas. I tend to work on 3 different pieces at the same time. I may have like a sculpture going, a painting going, a drawing going. I rotate around the studio, and I usually have a lot of pieces that are in process at the same time. These pieces are charcoal and pastel on canvas, and they're the female body, and it's all figurative drawing from the inside out. You can switch to the next one. And then that's the finished piece, a 47 by 35 on paper. It was a series of figurative abstract drawings. And always going for the abstract figure of inside out as opposed to any kind of realism. You can switch to the next slide. This was my studio again. Like I said, I work on the floor in a lot of different materials. I love paper. I love the sound of charcoal to paper. It's probably the way I begin every piece, whether I'm working in wood, working on canvas, working on paper. I always tend to start with charcoal and drawing, and then erasing and drawing and allowing the like the mistakes, the past, and leaving those impressions behind, and then building upon the surface. What I was working on here is the beginning of a series that I am still working on called Folded Females. And I would begin on paper and draw, and then I would cut them out and fold them and unfold them and start creating figurative forms and using the female form as a metaphor for women. And it was really started during the political unrest that I felt, an unrest for females and a feeling of vulnerability. So it was my way of folding in to fold out and find strength in those folds and new forms. You can switch to the next one. And then this is the outcome of the piece. And this is one of the pieces that's in the show with Alan at the Lockwood Gallery. And this is a triptych, and they can be hung as a mobile or reliefs on the wall. And again, it's all done intuitively. I will draw the figure, I will capture a gesture, I will cut and fold and manipulate the form until I get the emotion and the gesture that I was looking for. And it's really supposed to be a universal skin for female. And just like the whole folding process of folding in to fold out and to reveal, you know, physically and emotionally of the gesture that I want to explain. And I love malleable materials, so I tend to work with a lot of different materials with the same theme. I work in paper, canvas, clay, wood, and metal. And if we continue the next one, I try to remember what the next slide is. Let's
How do
see.
you keep the rigidity of these pieces? What kind of paper is it that's to start out with?
Yeah, this is it's really thick watercolor paper, really large watercolor paper. And these are also, again, paper, and they're paper reliefs. And it's glue, matte medium, very simple, basic materials. I really like to reuse materials. I love reuse. I love the simplicity of one material manipulated slightly, and you can completely change the gesture and the emotion and the feeling of the piece. So most of the sculptural pieces that you'll be seeing, it's one piece of paper, one piece of metal, one piece of clay. And by folding, manipulating, and just slightly changing the gesture, I hope to invoke a completely different emotional feeling from the form.
You're never adding wire or anything like that to stiffen them.
No, I'm actually not. I'm only using it's just the folding process. Of the folding process in the beginning was taking the female form, feeling what was going on in the world, environmentally and politically, feeling a feeling of unjust, and folding in and allowing my skin to reveal what is emotionally felt and physically felt, and then unfolding and finding a new form, which then holds its form and shows strength. So I was trying to portray the vulnerability and the beauty and the strength in vulnerability. And that's why I was trying to only use very simple forms. I didn't want to reinforce it too much. So the paper, it's very malleable and it does hold the shape, but these are actually sketches to make them in aluminum. So I'll be using these to realize other sculptures, and larger then I can make them any size. But the paper is my favorite. I love paper. I love the texture. I love the sound. I love the vulnerability. I love when it rips, I have to mend it. If something tears, you fix it. So it's all part of the theme that I'm working on. So you can go to the next one. I'm sorry?
Look, when I first looked at your work, I thought of de Kooning. But now that I've
you.
looked at more of the work, particularly the paper that's been folded, I'm thinking much more of Picasso. So it
Hmm,
reminds me of the plaster sculpture of Picasso that he would then paint on.
yeah,
Also some of the pottery work of Picasso.
yeah. They're all invited to my studio whenever I'm working. They're all welcome. So thank you. Yeah, I mean, I look at the masters all the time. All the time. I'm looking. I look at Delacroix. Of course, I look at Picasso, Matisse, Lee Krasner. I'm all of mostly the figurative abstract expressionists is really where my language lies. I'm always looking, always researching. And again, I really approach everything as a drawer. I really draw first. And this particular piece, like I was saying, I really love recycled material, especially when I'm teaching. I always use a lot of recycled material of how to reuse, mend, and make something new. And all of this piece, the figurative landscape here, is actually the discarded pieces, but not the discarded pieces, the pieces that were left behind when I'm making my sculptural large reliefs and mobiles. And then I turn them into collages. So I make really large collages occupying the negative space that surrounded the female figure while I was carving and drawing. So whenever I'm working, and the first charcoal drawings in the beginning, I'm always thinking three-dimensionally, always. The drawing always starts about 6 feet before I ever touch the paper or the canvas. I'm always thinking space, shape, and trying to invite and hope the viewer shares that space with the piece, the space between me and then the object. That's the space that I'm always hoping to invite someone in. So again, this is just the process of how I work. When I work on paper, I use all of the extra discarded material to create figurative landscape long collages. You can go to the next slide. And again, this is another piece. This is the piece that the ACLU just acquired, and I was really honored. It's called For Women, and it was for women. And I was just really happy that they picked this piece. It reflects on female experience. It's fragmented, it's folded, it was taken apart, put back together, trying to find a mutual connection and bond. It definitely was reflecting upon the female experience, body, women's rights, and just trying to tell a personal story and just support the female form. And so that this piece is, I have a few of these. It's actually, you can't tell with the photo, but it's about 2.5 inches high. It's a relief, and it's a large work on paper. And again, drawing, painting, cutting, folding, putting it back together. Okay, you can go to the next file. And again, it's the same thing. I'm basically doing the same thing from the first sketches that I showed you to the paper folds to the wood. I'm drawing. And it doesn't matter whether it's charcoal, a paintbrush, or a jigsaw, or a knife. I cut that line, I draw that line, I move that line, and create shapes, take it apart, and then I start putting it back together. So I'm always taking things apart and trying to find the new form by putting them back together. Again, it's intuitive. I don't see this first. I don't sketch it. I take the material. I just start building and creating. And if you look at it, it's very rough. I mean, the nail gun was my best friend. Just being able to put it all together. I like the roughness of it. I'm always looking for that edginess, yet that delicate femaleness at the same time. I love the edgy, the curve, the soft curve with the edgy roughness at the same time. And I think the next one is just another one that's, you can go to the next slide. And that's the piece that's at the show with Alan at the Lockwood Gallery. Again, the same thing is just carving, cutting, finding that figurative form, but really trying to express a gesture out of one piece. It's just one piece of wood that's drawn on, cut, and put back together. And the way you put it back together, you're creating that gesture. And I'm very inspired by dance. And music, but probably dance first, the figure in movement, trying to capture that feeling. You can go to the next one. And then this is a piece, it's about 48 to 50 inches high, and it's a pretty thick aluminum. And I create these, some by hand, I cut small myself, I make prototypes, but this is working with the fabricator. And each one is hand folded, and it's amazing machines, and we fold it. But again, it's one piece of aluminum, folded, manipulated, and cut to create a new form. And that's really the process that excites me the most, is just taking something and by a simple manipulation, you can completely evoke a new gesture. And you can go to the next one. Again, here's just another prototype. I'm working with different textures, thinking of color. I may be adding some color in different textures. And I've made a couple of these in just much different sizes. And I'm excited about them because they could be 6 inches high, or they could be 6 to 10 feet high. And that's what I'm starting to get excited about, is just scaling up, is making things just much bigger. So that's the new work that I'll be hopefully working on soon.
And is this a maquette then? Is this a small piece?
This piece is actually, it's a little larger than a maquette. It's like 36 maybe by 24. I forget the exact measurements on it, but it's large. I have some that can be on the floor, tabletop, small. I make them different sizes. But again, yeah, it probably is a maquette in my mind. I see it huge. I see it really big, outdoor pieces. So that's the next phase that I hope that I can start walking towards. Okay, you can go to the next. And then again, same thing. I'm just doing the same thing with clay. I love material. I love malleable material. I love clay. Clay is every touch that it has memory. It's about loss. You never know if it's going to make it through the kiln, the firing process. There's just so many metaphors to the process of working with clay that really connects to this particular series. So this is, again, just a figurative landscape in clay. And you can go to the next. And then these are some new pieces that I just started working on. I just call them a figurative sheath. It's just a simple cutout of clay. And just by a quick manipulation with your hands, you can create an entire gesture of dance and female. And I've made a bunch of these. I just haven't, this is just something new that I was doing at a residency, and it's pit fired, which I love. It's a clay that has all the natural minerals in it. So there's no control of glaze. The control happens in the fire, and you never know what you're going to get. You don't know if it's going to crack. You don't know what color it's going to be. Some of them crack and fall apart. And the gentleman who fires them for me, he always thinks I'm going to be upset. And I'm like, great, I'll just put them back together. I'll glue them back. I'll piece them back together. I love the unknown and the chance and the process of it all, but the natural minerals are just so exciting for me, because it's the flame and what's in the fire that creates the color. I don't know if any of you have ever fired work in a wood fire, but it's a really exciting process. And I think I have some more. I'm not sure. I think I have some drawings and paintings. Yeah, just again, I do a lot of really colorful oils. I didn't show all of them, but I always go back to monochromatic. I have to always go back to the black and white, the mark making, the visual language of charcoal to paper to canvas, the layering, the erasing, the kind of like marks left behind. I'm always like looking for that gray poetry space of unknown, of just trying to find the gesture in the drawing. And this is inspired by dance, this piece. I think you can go to the next. It might be when it was finished, I think. Yeah, and that's the piece when it was finished. I just built up the layers, color, marks, line. This is an acrylic 60 by 48 that was inspired by a Martha Graham dance. Okay, can you go to the next? And this is a similar piece, again, starting with charcoal, layering, erasing, drawing, finding the form. This was more of my figurative fragmented females, kind of similar to the paperwork, done in oil and charcoal and layering and just building up of the form. And again, a bit inspired by dance. Dance and movement and gesture is always where my work tends to align. Okay, you can go to the next. Oh, and these are, I think the last couple of pieces are pieces that I have a series also that I developed. They're figurative large format paintings that all pay tribute to the masters. I grew up going to the Met. I can't have it. It's constantly in my memory of feelings of paintings from when I was 8 until an adult. Just always going, reflecting, and being in front of these amazing works. A lot of the references are of Delacroix. This one is actually called The Lost Leonardo. It was a painting that is lost. It was a fresco painting that they can't find anymore. It's on some wall, it's lost. And so I just reflect and do a series that is just a reflection on the masters and artists that I love. I think you can go to the next.
How many more do you have?
I think just this one, drawing, equestrian, and then I think there's just one more. You can go to the next. And then that's the last piece, again, referencing the masters, and it's called The Pearl Fishers. And this piece is also at the Lockwood Gallery in the show that we're having. And it's oil on paper. But that's it. Thank you.
Now we will move on to David Anselm Turner. David Anselm Turner was born on a Navajo reservation in New Mexico and grew up in both the US and Europe. He earned a BA in art at Middlebury College, where he studied Japanese. He was awarded a scholarship to study at Kansai University in Japan, and there he discovered Japanese theater, film, and the dynamic work of Kazuo Shiraga. He then set up a studio in Hong Kong, where he earned his living painting murals and designing film and theater sets. He went to study painting at the Escola Messana in Barcelona, where his interest in the notions of fragility of cultural identity, human relations, immigration, and memory took hold. It was also during this time he became interested in the process and perception using gestural applications and correction of paint. Fascinated with storytelling potential of film, Turner wrote short scripts and drew storyboards for independent filmmakers and commercial directors. Meanwhile, he had his first solo exhibition in Paris, as well as exhibiting in numerous salons. Soon after, he studied film and theater directing at the Polish National Film School in Lodz. His films have screened at major festivals around the world, including those of Toronto, Cannes, Venice, New York, and Los Angeles. Meanwhile, his long obsession with painting and drawing permanently took hold. He has shown work in Barcelona, Paris, and Hong Kong. He has won grants from the Kosciuszko Foundation and the French Consulate, and has done a residency at the Vermont Studio Center. He currently lives in Brooklyn, New York. David. Hopefully you're unmuted, David.
Okay. Can you see this image here?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this is, I've got this is going to be pretty short. This is one of my first black and whites. My background is very mishmashed, as you can tell by what Doug said. I've been fascinated by drawing from the start. My process is additive and corrective, subtractive, whatever you want to call it. I've just never been very confident as a painter. But my background is definitely a figurative painter, influenced by abstract expressionism for the most part. For a spell, I worked in the Christie's Contemporary warehouse. So I got to see this stuff firsthand, and it had a great influence on me. Despite moving around, I could never really shake it. So that was the starting point. I've always been concerned with, sorry, I'm just going to try and get another image up here. Oh, God. Bear with me. Okay, already technical problems. Sorry, just trying to get my screen share thing to go. So sorry, guys. Resume share. Here we go. Okay, so going to the next. Okay, so the work remained very figurative. I was probably very influenced by the Baroque painters, Caravaggio, Delatour. As a kid, I really looked at them quite a bit, but I was also looking for something else. I stayed with black and white, even though I was doing paintings, and eventually made the crossover after a series of drawings, which I will pull up now, that brought me closer into losing form. There was a transition when I was in Barcelona. I was looking at Arte Povere a lot and the work of Miguel Barceló and Tapies, and just questioning the idea of the formality of perspective and Renaissance idea of art, and ended up doing these abstract pieces, which again brought me back to the American school of people like Diebenkorn, Franz Klein, de Kooning. So breaking down the picture plane, I tried to escape it, but never really did. Another artist who Doug had mentioned he met as a kid, which I'm very envious of, Jim Dine. His drawings, his tool drawings, had a great effect on me. I love the idea of just destroying things and trying to get to the essence and creating things using the negative, what was around the objects more than what were the objects themselves. These are larger paintings. This is like 7 feet by 6 feet, possibly bigger. Still using the idea of drawing. They became much more contemplative. I was looking for some dramatic tension, something that I'd found in film, or I knew that I wanted in film, but couldn't actually find it. But the dynamics between line, color field, and yeah, shifting space. I ended up trying to tone that down very self-consciously. And these are the results. These are all large scale paintings. They're very much, I use real experience as a starting point, memory or memories of emotions as a jumping off point. Process is all important. I use whatever's around. I've kind of boiled it down to sponges, squeegees, and brushes. Still using drawing as or the line as a as a gestural release. I like the immediacy of it. I like the experience, the experience of doing it. Just trying to quickly give a visual portrait of what I'm trying to say so badly after. Okay, here we go. Eventually things have started to tone down. These are all images made here in Brooklyn. Still remaining scale, but still trying to define or destroy space. Trying to compress and flatten the surface. I've tried to keep a simplified palette, but I'm constantly led down the garden path. I think many of these are also dreamlike in terms of their starting points. This is a smaller piece. It's a few inches across. Space started to find its way back into the work. And then I became more influenced by the paint itself. This is probably the most recent one here.
Soulage.
What's that?
Soulage.
Pierre Soulage?
Oui.
Yeah. No, I do like Soulage. Soulage, Elizabeth Murray, both huge influences. A little bit of Picasso in there, always. The drawings themselves have gone from what I'm showing now in Alan's gallery. This is Drones in the Garden to more simplified line drawings. Scale kind of varies. At the moment, they're small. The one on my wall here is about 5 feet bigger. And it's an ongoing discovery that I'm trying to distill and feeling, there is no end. But it's become a reprise from what I feel is a very chaotic world, or world in flux. It's maybe in reaction to the void of imageries that I see now all the time on my screen. I love, for that reason, drawing. I'm not very good at working from concepts. In fact, I'm terrible at it. I can't do it. So I remain rooted in personal experience. And that's about it. Boom.
Let's go to you, the three of you, as a panel. Jerry Saltz, who some people consider to be a critic, he certainly does. Other people consider him more of an entertainer. He recently said that much too much abstract art and too many abstract artists are copying old styles of abstraction. They're lifting, they're very freely lifting gestures, iconic shapes, etc., from from some of the early generations of abstract expressionism in particular. And he was, I guess he was miffed with that idea. What do you feel about that? How do you feel as artists? Certainly each of you is reaching back and you know, treading some familiar ground. I'm certainly guilty of it myself. Is it a disqualifier or is it irrelevant, or how do you feel about it?
It's kind of inevitable.
You know,
I mean, you see it in any art form. It's part of the language of growing,
what about Kathy or Heidi?
not just a cultural reference
Oh.
point.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm an advocate of standing on the shoulders of giants. I really do. I think that you use a backpack and you look at as much as you can. And you put it as an educator, you just put it in your backpack, you put it in your backpack, you look, and you tend to be, you tend to look at language that is similar to the way that you think or draw or design. So like I always look at Delacroix and then I'll look at Picasso and then I'll look at it. Like I'll look at who they looked at, because the drawing, I'm always looking at their drawings too. I'm always looking at how did they draw? How did they think? And you sometimes find a similar way of thought. And that's why that artist makes sense to you. And it's, it all starts to, just to make sense, but it's not that you're using what they do. You put it away and then you abandon it all and then you start doing your work. So, and that's the student part. And then you know when you're studying and you know when you're actually working and you're in your studio and you're making art. So that's how I always see it, is that you can't help but absorb, and like we have a lifetime of looking. So you can't not look at, there's so many different forms of inspiration. There's nature, music, dance, art, other forms of art. So I say look and put it away and then abandon it and do your own.
You have to unmute yourself, Kathy. You need to unmute. You're muted.
Okay, so I'm a lover of art history, and I love a lot of different forms of art. And I actually can still memorize. I memorized the pages that certain paintings are in the Jansen book from school. I still know what page they're on. But I'm unable, I think, in the studio to assimilate it in a direct way into my work, because what I'm trying to do is to conjure this thing that's in the future, something I feel is going to happen. So that, in a lot of ways, maybe I relate to certain surrealists and certain what are they called? Clairvoyance, like the turn of the century in the 1900s, people like Emma Kuntz, and yeah, that kind of work where it really isn't relative to art history, even though I love it and I'm a big admirer. But when I get to working, I feel I can't incorporate it. So I am making this thing that's maybe strange to some people because it doesn't formally extend off of something.
We're living in an era, really, where there is no one overarching movement. There are many, many movements that are simultaneously holding forth,
Right.
and have their adherents, including, to a great extent, abstract expressionism, although it's not all equally same type.
Mhm.
but essentially a lot of things that came forward in the 40s, 50s, and early 60s are still going strong.
Mhm.
But I noticed a research, I'm sorry I don't have, I usually like to have the source of research, but I noticed a piece of research yesterday that suggested that last year there were about a little greater than 50% of artists in contemporary art painting in some form of abstract form, not just gestural abstraction, but in some form of abstraction.
Mhm.
And that was against about 35 or 36% that were painting pretty representationally within the contemporary art world.
Mhm.
And that in the year that passed since then, those two, abstraction versus representational, were almost, exactly the same at 36% or so.
Mhm.
Indicated that there was some falling off in people working in abstraction.
Mm.
And then I noticed, actually this morning, I saw it, I think either on Facebook or maybe it was Google, the Google News feed, David Hockney quoted as saying, abstraction is over, okay? Which reminds me a little bit of the canard that used to come up decade after decade, painting is dead. And then everybody would say, oh yeah, so everybody's going to do installation or they're going to do something else and it's not going to be painting, right?
Mhm.
So, which reminds me of the old line, the reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. I think that's
Yeah.
Samuel Clemens.
Well,
So I think that the show at Lockwood is a great example, and thank you, Alan Goulman, that there are so many different blossomings of abstraction. And I think most of them, not all of them, but most, I don't think there was any color field painting per se in the show. But most of the work in the show really shows the diversity of abstraction today. And certainly judging by the galleries and museums, abstraction is still going quite strong and attracting new adherents all the time. I was going to ask just one or two more questions. And I'm looking to say, I don't see anything new in the chat. Let me just take a careful look here to see. Do any of you use assistants in doing what you're doing, particularly when you're working larger?
I use assistants, but not to paint on my paintings.
Right.
Yeah, I use them for text assistance and stretching canvases. That's about it.
Right.
Yeah, the only assistants that I'm using right now are fabricators when I'm making something large format or the metal so thick. So no, I always work alone in my studio.
If any of you want to come on over, I'm happy to have you.
Right.
Women on deferral.
There's a question here for me.
Yes.
Do I consider myself a medium?
Oh, from Jennifer Shoemaker. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you?
Well, a medium. I've had experiences that have kind of scared me because I do sometimes foresee things that are events that are going to happen, but they're mainly events in the universe, like an earth. I was in an earthquake, it's 8.9, and I knew it was coming. Like that's like an animal thing. What?
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's very powerful.
And other things, it pops up occasionally. So, but I feel that the mode that I'm working in and how I, am discovering the image. I don't know if you call it a medium, but it's I'm looking for something that is not knowable intellectually.
All of you are mark makers extraordinaire. And, you know, the way I use mark making is I start that way. You know, I'll make marks that are not necessarily consistent with where I think I'm going to be going. They're just sort of a launching pad. But your work, all of you, all three of you, is very much about the mark making, and even the mark making as the end goal of what you're setting out to do. So it's kind of it's almost like in your case, Heidi, like a pattern cutter in fashion, you know, someone, a dressmaker, a suit, you know, bespoke suit tailor that is making chalk marks and then cutting with a big scissor and folding and so forth. And, you know, and suits are made often with canvas underlying the fabric. And David is very much a mark maker. All of you are definitely mark makers. And it's really, your art is very much about your mark making, which is pretty interesting because it's not universal among abstractionists. It's a kind of subcult of abstraction. So it's interesting that you ended up, I mean, it's not surprising you ended up in this show, but it's interesting that you ended up, and thank you, Alan, again, for selecting these three to be in this Zoom, because you're definitely your cousins. You know, you're cousins of the charcoal. So I don't see any other questions. So I think that I'm going to pass this on to Jacqueline to bid us good night. And I greatly appreciate the participation of all of you and of our audience. And Jackie, jump in.
Well, yes, I just agree with Doug. Thank you all for coming. It was a wonderful panel. I personally really found it extremely interesting. And I'm not an abstract painter myself. And so, you know, this really dug deep into the many aspects of it, which I found completely fascinating. So thank you all for being here, and also for this wonderful audience that we've had, and all the great comments. And hope to see you next week for that art business talk, which we can all use, I'm sure. Anyway, so with that, I say good night.